Welcome to the Dragon's Library, your source for games, movies, shows, and more. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So, today is not a happy fun day. Today is a day of disappointment, even within disappointment and pain. Lots of pain. So, let's try and stick to our organization today. I'll try and hammer that home. Alright, what are we reviewing? Well, if you've clicked on the video or the podcast, you've seen exactly what it is. We're reviewing Morbius. And oh my gods, this is one of the worst superhero adjacent things in years. It was atrocious. It was an hour and a half of my life I will never get back. 2 hours with trailers. I could have done so much with those 2 hours. Watched literally anything else. I'm disappointed in myself for going to this movie. But I at least can warn other people not to watch it. So, let's get to that. Alright, so, first thing you need to know about this. I ended up going to this movie because I'm almost done with Obsidian, but I wanted to space out some stuff, and it's going to be better for me to do Obsidian on Tuesday, so I can have more time to organize my thoughts on it. A long book that I've read over the course of a week needs more than a movie I watched in 2 hours, so I went and said, alright, Morbius is out today, it'll be good for traffic, so let's go see it. So I got to see it. And it was atrocious. Context. Time for context. For those of you who don't know, Morbius is a Spider-Man villain / anti-hero. I'm not that familiar with the character. I've only seen him in a few things, mostly the zombie stuff. From Marvel Zombies, where he was like one of the infected or whatever. But I am aware of the basic idea of him. Basically, he had a blood disease, and because this is, one of Spider-Man's villains, or at least he originally was one of Spider-Man's villains, he's, again, like a lot of Spider-Man's Rose Gallery, trying to transmute it into more of an anti-hero over time. He tried to fuse his DNA with that of a bat, because a vampire bat, in order to cure himself. And he essentially became what I like to call a science vampire. And a science vampire is different from a normal vampire. So, vampires are in, like, a few different classifications for you. You have your generic vampire, which is, the standard rules, usually affected by crosses, sunlight affects them, that kind of stuff. A science vampire is divided into two categories. Bat-based science vampire and science trying to explain magic vampires, which are basically just magic vampire, but they try and explain the why the ultraviolet rays of the sun affect them, and, they're not actually for their crosses, piercing the heart is important, not that. He's not one of those. He is a bat hybrid science vampire. Although this movie can't seem to make up its frickin' mind over which he actually is. The main difference is usually that you put this in a sci-fi setting instead of a fantasy one. That's really all there is to it. It's just something a lot of pretentious people do because they don't feel like playing around with the vampire idea, or they want to use a vampire in a sci-fi setting. There's really not that much use for this type of vampire, in my opinion. It's basically just a pretentious haircut over what is essentially, for basically every intents and purposes, a vampire. He still craves blood. He can fly somehow. They never really explain that properly. They make it seem like he's using the vibrations. It's really dumb. He has a lust for blood. His lust for blood can overwhelm him and cause him to go into a feral state where he can't really control himself. Typical vampire stuff. But there is more focus on echolocation and trying to explain that, this is all from bat stuff. Although this is really just so dumb. No, I'm sorry. See, the thing I've always had a problem with this, and this is still part of context, the problem with he's just a bat hybrid who wants blood and stuff like that, is you have to attribute a lot of things to make it look like a typical vampire. There's the whole transformation he has. Like I said, he has flight without wings. There's all sorts of little things like that. And eventually you just get to the point where it's why didn't you just make him a regular vampire? You clearly just want to make him a regular vampire. Why didn't you do that? Now, I guess in comics, it might have been more interesting because it's basically a flavor of variance in the thousands, but geez, in a movie, it's just boring. And I have no attachment to this character or Sony's pathetic little Sinister Six verse, especially after that post-credit scene, so. Anyone who's a Dr. Morbius fan, I can't speak as one, so do what you will is the information I'm giving to you. Alright, on to the plot. So, basically, the plot is pretty much this, in the movie is pretty similar to the origin story for the character. He's born with a rare blood disease. He and his, friend, who, basically adopted brother growing up under an adoptive father who was their doctor. They were sent away to this, special, hospital. And I gotta admit, those early scenes with him were actually pretty interesting. Like, the scenes with the kid him, where I was like, they're not terrible. This is like, okay, average, pretty standards. Like, this feels like the stock movie plot, but it's not worth like this, because I checked the Rotten Tomatoes scores before I went to go see it. It wasn't worth 17 out of 10. And, it goes on, and it's like, okay, he's, trying to experiment with bats secretly. He's hired a lot of these people to go grab him a bunch of special vampire bats to do some DNA testing. He believes that they're coagulant they produce. If he can isolate the genes for that, he can give their blood a more stable, compound, and he can make them, he can essentially like remove the problem with their genetic makeup. It's like, okay, so it's, basically just sci-fi level CRISPR at this point, because we're actually working on doing stuff like that in real life. Fun fact, they're working on making it so mosquitoes either die off after a few generations and spread this. Basically, all the females die off, but all the males will survive. They're also making a variant of mosquitoes that have mouths that can't bite humans, and another variant that can't carry malaria. And eventually, we might release it into the wild. So we're already doing genetic modifications like this in real life now, which makes these sci-fi premises seem even more ridiculous than they used to. But, so yeah, he does this, because he wants to find a cure for him and his, adopted brother. The brother, who's apparently, I inferred was kind of like the son of some rich parents. He's been funding the research, and Dr. Morbius and his partner, who, she's, another doctor as well, so they mentioned that 3 times. Because it needed clarification, I guess. So they go to, she finds out Morbius has been working on genetic modification in secret, because this is still, in real life, it's also still a very controversial topic, and human experimentation with this stuff is, straight up off the books kind of thing. He didn't tell her because, plausible deniability. He actually did care about it, or she didn't want to get involved in this, but once she finds out, she's like, oh, no, I want to help. So they have to go into international waters. At first I thought it was going to be really stupid, because, fun fact, international waters doesn't actually mean you can do anything. Whatever the, flag your ship is flying is the, country whose laws apply to you. But they actually do mention the ship that this is some small, I don't remember the name of the country. It was a small, forgettable country. It's okay, so they were flying a specific flag, and they were flying these specific flags, so they didn't have to go to the country, but they could also be under those laws, so they didn't have to worry about the illegal actions. And yeah, some countries do allow stuff like this. Fun fact, China's a lot more, less stringent on this, and they've actually allowed, early human experimentation with CRISPR to happen. There's a pair of twins or something like that who had, CRISPR modifications, and we're gonna see how that goes in China. But yeah. So they do the experiment. Obviously it goes wrong. He kills everyone on the ship except for the doctor, because the doctor got knocked out and he managed to get some control over himself and didn't kill her. He wakes up after that happens, calls an SOS, and jumps overboard because he doesn't want, everyone to find out he's a murderous monster now. He gets back to the lab, starts doing tests, echolocation. I have super speed and super agility now, but I need to keep drinking blood. He made some artificial blood as this big breakthrough, so he takes that. And it's basically your standard plot. Hey, I made a cure for our disease, but it, turned me into a horrific monster. The friend just wants a cure, so he takes the cure anyway. The friend starts going a little bit crazy. Conflict ensues. It's basically it's basically going straight for his, anti-hero or sort of, side, Marvel character, status. And I'm I'm fine with that with Morbius. Venom, it's a little more dubious, honestly, in my opinion. And I don't know what the hell they're going to do with that, the other Sinister Six members, but go ahead and try, Sony. You're only subjecting me to torture. I don't really care. I'm numb to it at this point. I am looking forward to Spider-Verse Part 2, though. There was a trailer for that. But, yeah, that was basically the plot. It's weird. So the script for this is so bizarre to me, because when I look at the individual scenes outside of the context of the movie, okay? it almost looks like they took, like, 4 different versions of this script. You know, like, for example, in the beginning, Dr. Morbius is, the one recklessly trying to pursue science to any degree at all, and is really excited about it. And some of the testing scenes when he has powers, he's really excited about what he can do. But then he seems to, like, switch on a dime, like, not just, like, realize, but, like, completely flip personalities into, this is dangerous, I need to kill myself mode. And the friend starts out with, no, look, I've just trying to enjoy life now. I've accepted I'm going to die. Morbius, there is no cure. We need to go on and live. I actually thought they were going to do an interesting twist where the guy wasn't going to get the powers and do it. I thought Morbius was going to, like, offer it to him. It's like, look, we can keep drinking the artificial blood or something like that, and we can just, be like this. And he was going to reject it because he's like, I come to terms with it. That's what I thought they were going for first, because that was his personality in the first act. But then he, like, flips on a dime and becomes this, like, willful murderer. Like, he literally kills a nurse by accident when he first transforms, and Morbius gets blamed for it. And after that, he's just murdering people left and right. I'm like, what the heck? Wait, what happened to the slight moral compass over there? And they have this weird, like, the many versus the weak versus the many. It's supposed to be like a Spartan quote, and it's just like, it's all so scattershot. It feels like they had, like, 4 different versions of this. Like, where Morbius' personality is a little different here, the plot plays out a little different here, they have different abilities over here. It feels like there were 4 different versions of the script, and they couldn't decide on one, so they just decided to cherry pick their favorite version of each scene and shove it together into a movie. Because this thing makes no sense at all. This isn't even pedantic. This is just basic following the plot nonsense. The only fun I had from this is the opening sequence as a kid was effective. It wasn't, like, amazing or anything. I'd rate, like, a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. Which is pretty bad for my scales. So I think of 7, I grade stuff like you get graded on, like, a school paper. So for me, a 7 is a pass. A 5 is, this is functional. And 4 and below are, this is really shitty, and at least one of the aspects of this is really bad. For the record, the movie as a whole is much lower than that score. That opening scene and a handful of jokes where people do things like bring holy water to see him for the first time before they realize he's not, like, that kind of vampire. And the one where the female friend, after meeting with him again, after they meet up again, she's like, here's a cup of coffee. It's sitting in sunlight. It's like, here, the sun doesn't burn me. Happy? It's like, yes, I'm actually happy now. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fair. And actually, those scenes are probably my favorite parts because they show the cast acting a lot smarter and more aware of the situation they're in. Like, yeah, a normal person would if a normal person saw somebody else growing fangs, becoming more bat-like, and drinking blood while losing control of themselves, and that person then came to them and said, I have it under control right now, I need your help with some stuff, they would totally make them stick their hand in sunlight first. That's just smart. That's just, that's all the good I have to say for that. The only average parts of this are, I guess some of the scenes are technically functional, and, like, the plot is, as a whole, like, the overarching beats of the plot work to a certain extent. It's just that the details fuck everything up. And the actors themselves are doing an okay job. I actually liked the guy playing Dr. Morbius. It's like, you know what? I buy this is Morbius. I buy this is Dr. Morbius. I just didn't care about basically anyone else in the plot, aside from maybe, like, the 2 FBI agents who are kind of funny, side characters, although they're dumb too for reasons I'll get into late in the spoiler section. And, yeah, like, the actors are okay. So that's the plot and actors. Moving on from that, we have the technical. How does this movie look? It looks like ass. So, for this movie, they have a lot of different, like, the main special effect is the seeing through sonar thing, and it's just so dumb. It does not look good. It looks like they just blurred the screen, and it doesn't look great. The action, the way it cuts is just, like, every time they have a fight scene, I don't know what the hell is going on. And that's an effective way to do action when you had things like the horror almost hinge scene in the boat when he was killing all the mercenaries. after he first transformed. It's like, okay, this is supposed to be claustrophobic with them getting picked off one by one. But even then, it was like hard to tell in places where I don't think it was supposed to be hard to tell. I think they just shot it poorly. And it works okay there because it's a horror scene. But when you have some of the action beats towards the mid and late portions of this movie, they're basically incoherent. Not to even get started on just all the stupid blurring, sound waves echoing off everything, special effect just looks so bad. Like, I've seen better ways of visualizing echolocation and sound-based powers. This is a shit way of doing it. And the flight scene, oh my god, that looked like atrocious. Like the first flight scene when he was in the tunnels, it's generally supposed to be something where it's like, oh cool, look at our special effects. And it's like, I don't want to look at your special effects. They're terrible. Like, he looks like he's being held aloft by fucking wires. It's the whole production. Like, the best parts of this production are average. The rest of it is just garbage. And they are few and far between. Those tiny little points of average are the peaks. The tiny little peaks in the fucking lowlands. I hate this movie so much. I'm not this negative about movies. Like, anybody who's watched my channel for this long knows I am very forgiving to a lot of flaws if I've had a fun time. I tend to grade entertainment based on what it was trying to do. I really do. Like, for example, I believe I gave Horizon, Forbidden West like a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10. And the reason I did that is because despite a few glitches and a little buggy, I think it achieved what it was trying to do, is be a sequel to Horizon. Be a better version of that. I grade movies based on what they are aiming to achieve, not how they rank versus everything else. Just because I gave this something a 9.5 and something else a 9 doesn't necessarily mean I think it's worse. I think it means it failed to reach its achievements better. But when I grade something lower than a 5, it has vastly disappointed me, and I do not like grading stuff that low, honestly. Because I think that a little context for me, and this is a little about who I am personally. I read fanfiction. Now, I know you're all cringing. And guess what? Unlike basically anyone else who's read fanfiction, I will tell you you have every right to. For me, fanfiction is sort of like, is basically a medium where there is literally no barrier to entry. There's no cost to making up fanfiction aside from time. You don't even have to make up your own characters, and you're free to make up the most self-indulgent characters you want because you don't do this for money. And you don't have to you're not required to make sure people like it. Which means there's literally no creative cost to making a work. But you also get to play around with some really nice ideas. And as a result, fanfiction has had some of my favorite stories of all time. And also some stories so bad they have recontextualized what is bad for me. As a result of reading those, I've seen the worst of the worst. As a story, and let me be very clear here, the base overview of this plot line is generic and bullshit and boring. Like, it's like a 6 out of 10 plot line overall. I've seen worse. I've seen a lot worse than this. But this is a big blockbuster movie that was trying to be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff, and we will get to that fucking bullshit. And it was trying to act like it was more than it is. Those fanfictions, those are trashy, self-indulgent wish fulfillment. They know exactly what they are. They're still like a 1 or a 0 out of 10, but they know what they are. This is trying to act like it's better. It's not. It's shit. And again, the more money something has in it, the bigger a time investment I had to put into it, the more effort that had to go into it on both their end and my end, the more I expect out of it. And this, for all the money they threw into it, for all the actors trying their best, it is just not worth going to see. This is not a movie worth going to see. There's no cost to looking at those fanfictions online aside from a bit of time. And I can do that whenever I want. Like, as I'm walking up the stairs to work. But this movie, I went out to go see, used some money to go see it, and it was just an utter disappointment. And I had no hopes for this movie. I want to be very clear. I went into this movie with bottom expectations and I was still disappointed. When anyone was trying to do serious scenes, I was laughing at how bad they were. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. It is technically functional, so I cannot rate it a 3 or lower. 3 or lowers are meaning that something is failed in multiple different ways. Like it has a completely unworkable script. It has a completely unworkable, effects. It has a completely unusable, cast. Like the cast is terrible. The plot is objectively terrible, even on an overarching level and the technicals level. Those are my 3 qualifications to get knocked down to 3, 2, and 1. You have to have one of those things wrong for 3, 2 of them for 2, and all 3 of them for 1. And if you somehow manage to do all of those and do worse stuff, then you get a 0. Just in case you were wondering what it takes to be a 3 to 0 on my scale. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10 based on how I grade this. Now, let me make it very clear. I understand most people are grading this a 1 out of 10. And if that's how you choose to grade this, that is perfectly valid because this movie is shit. But, yeah. So, we're going to move into spoiler section. Trust me, you do not need to leave. You are missing nothing. Alright, so where to start here? Oh, Well, let's start with the bullshit stuff first. Okay, so, they don't explain how the vampire powers work. At all. Like, there's no rules for this. It's whatever they feel like. So, at first, it's just like, okay, so you got superhuman agility and stuff like that, superhuman stuff, but it fades over time, in direct proportion to how long he's drank blood. If he uses false blood, it takes 6 hours, but if he uses red blood, it'll last longer. This time period for the fake blood is fading each time he takes it, so by a few days later, it's down to like 4 hours and he has to drink more blue blood. And this is artificial blood he created as one of his, like, scientific achievements before he went on to do this. I will admit they characterize him pretty well in the opening scene. Again, I said the opening scene where he's a child and then going to this award ceremony is pretty nice, especially when they cut to him trying to comfort a little girl, and immediately it's just like, so you kind of just blew off the award ceremony? It's like, I'm not here doing this for the award. I'm here doing this to get the work done to try and help people like us. And it's like, oh, okay, so you're actually characterizing him as a doctor who is constantly blowing off social interactions and, anything that gets in the way of him solving this disease, fixing them. It's like, okay, that's pretty much right. And again, it's a little moments like that prevent me from saying this plot is completely unworkable. Because I think the overarching idea of, the character tries to do spends years trying to fix his disease for him and his brother. The thing caused him to turn into a monster. That, like, the idea for this plot works for this character, I think. It's just, the execution is really bad. Again, I could definitely see myself if I had reviewed this a little earlier in the evening, like right after I got back, maybe giving this a 3, so maybe I was a little too kind even to this movie. I don't think I was, so I think I've trashed it pretty thoroughly. Oh god, I forgot to talk about I didn't talk about the fucking, adopted brother. Okay, so this is really stupid thing. It's the one thing I kind of find really annoying, because it was fine in the kids section, but as they continue into the adult section. So, you have the brother who basically he's called Milo throughout the whole film. But the reason he's called Milo is because when Michael first meets him as a kid, he basically says, oh, you're Milo now. It's like, actually, my name's Lucius. And it's like, yeah, you're Milo because I don't want to remember a new name because ever since I first got here and first met a guy named Milo in that bed, no one's lasted more than a few months, so you're Milo, and maybe if you survive long enough, I'll learn your name. But they never do it. Like, even in the adult section, literally everyone is calling this guy Milo. Which is weird. Like, it's almost like, it was like kind of a jab at him, how he's not gonna be that long, but even after he's been like his brother, essentially his brother for years, he's still calling him almost this like insulting nickname, which almost makes you see Morbius as a joke, that's kind of a jerk, which fit into his previous characterization, but then they have like the doctor who essentially raised them, and it's just like, oh, he's also calling him Milo, so that's just his name now. He just changed his name to Milo after his surrogate brother insulted him when they first met. Okay. again, it's just little stuff like this that doesn't, like, they're just not thinking. It's like, they've been calling him Milo for the whole movie, so of course everyone else is gonna call him Milo too. It's like, there's a reason Morbius called him Milo. The Doctor most certainly should not have been calling him Milo. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, there's this incident, and Morbius proves very helpful in the hospital. He repairs one of the blood machines when it fails. The Doctor is really impressed and decides to send Morbius off to a special school, for gifted people. And but he's worried about what will happen to Milo while he's gone, so the Doctor promises to watch over him. And that basically becomes their dynamic for the next, 15 years. Again, this movie is not very good. Even the overarching plot is only, slightly below average to average. So, Morbius is doing his science stuff. Everything's going fine. Incident happens on the boat. And the vampire abilities are just not explained, at all. So, when Morbius first gets the ability, he's, slightly superhuman, like I talked about earlier. And the bats he has on display in his lab do not attack him. They don't try and drain his blood. They're these, special South American vampire bats. And he has, echolocation. Okay. So that's all fine. And then, during the fight scene after Milo, tricks him. Actually, I do like the scene where Milo is revealed to have taken the serum, because originally Milo found Morbius in there. He, isolated himself to see how long he could go without blood. He raced and got Morbius some blood while Morbius calmed down. He asked about the cure. Morbius was like, no, this is too bad, too evil. We cannot give it to her. I cannot do this to someone else. But apparently Milo stole it, although there's no scene that shows him stealing it. In fact, we don't even know Milo's taken it until after the nurse is murdered. Morbius is arrested by the FBI because they think, guy who has a direct connection to two of the murders, probably the murderer. Morbius gets revealed as, his vampire self and gets locked in maximum security supervillain prison. Or at least whatever version of it they have in this world. And Milo comes in, pretending to be his lawyer so he can talk to him. He's like, I know you didn't do it, brother. And as he walks out, he leaves behind the cane they need to walk because of their disease. It takes a moment to notice it, and as he's leaving the hospital, you suddenly realize, wait, he's not walking with his cane. And it cuts back to Morbius, getting up from his, bed to realize that although his friend left, he's not using the cane, and it all suddenly crashes in on him. It's like, holy shit, he killed her. And they don't actually say it out loud. They have Morbius figure it out all in his head. It was the only scene in this entire movie that made me sit up and go, you know what? That's actually well done. It is the singular point in this movie that I will freely admit it. That one scene made me go, okay, maybe people are judging us too harshly because there's complete shit up to this point. Maybe this is the point where it turns it around now. No. It's just just continues to be bad. The brother continues just randomly murdering people. Again, it was the nurse he lost control. But after that, he's Milo goes down to this newspaper shop and they talk about his brother. He's like, oh yeah, that guy always looked like a bit of a creep to me. I mean, just look at him. And Milo's like, oh, you shouldn't judge people by looks, and just fucking murders him in the middle of the street. He just made a passing comment and he didn't know he was your brother. And it's Milo was just murdering people with no remorse. And it's just this feels like a complete 180. Maybe I was missing some signs, but I didn't see any sign that he was a complete and utter sociopath. It's just things like this. It's it makes sense on a surface. Milo slowly giving in, or, Lucius slowly giving into the, temptations of the blood and the violence makes sense as a plot device, but in practice, he just kind of goes from zero to murder. And it's just really weird. Oh, also, they immediately have a fight, okay? And this really annoys me. So, after he murders the newspaper stand person, Morbius, who broke out of prison once he realized what had happened and that he was being framed, fought Milo. And they fight on the streets. They are flying around, throwing punches at each other with superhuman strength, crawling on the walls. There are dozens of witnesses to both him and Milo fighting. And when the cops get there, they think Morbius is the only one who has murdered someone as he leaves. They do not think Milo killed anyone. Now, there are some other cops that show up. They get murdered by Milo. And when the FBI agents eventually show up as Morbius is fleeing and Milo got away, they think Morbius did it. Because none of the dozens of witnesses were like, oh, no, it wasn't Morbius. It was this other guy who was like flying all over the place and trying to kill him. And he ripped that police officer's neck off. It totally wasn't Morbius, man. Like, I cannot express this enough. There were dozens of civilians who saw what happened. It is just so dumb. And then, it's not that Milo just managed to fool them, because, like, literally, like, within a day, they find another set of murders Milo's committed on CCTV, and then they realize there are two people, but they're still blaming Morbius for the policeman killing, and the nurse killing. Like, it is so dumb. It's like, and again, this is one of those scenes that make me go, I feel like these are from two different movies, because the whole they arrive and think Morbius did it doesn't connect with the whole there were lots of civilians around. It almost feels like there were two different versions of the scenes, and they went with both these scenes, and they went with two incompatible ones. It's just so stupid, and stuff like this happens all the time. If it's not that, it's the inconsistent vampire power. So at first it seems very simple, but then Morbius in the final battle whips out the power to control bats out of nowhere, and then it's revealed that the girlfriend who had been murdered by Milo, and then because Morbius was hungry and her blood was everywhere, he ended up like taking a bite out of her neck. Apparently, even though she should have been like dead at this point after by the time he took a bite, turned into a vampire. So either Milo injected her with maybe like, cause there were two other serum vials. So there was an extra one if Milo had taken both of them. So maybe he injected her with that, but like there's no scene like that. It looks like she's just putting his claw through her throat. So it doesn't look like he injected her. What if he did? But he must have injected her, because we get that whole scene where the mouse dies, but then they go away to do something and they come back and they find it's alive again. So it would fit with the whole, injection thing. But the way the scene is shot before when she's murdered is Milo just ripped her freaking throat out and, Morbius found her. Like, it doesn't look like she was infected or whatever. So in the actual way this is structured, it looks more like she died, but Morbius drank her blood, but not all of her blood, so she turned into a vampire. But this whole thing was like a specific spinal fluid injection that you had, like Morbius had to get this thing injected just between certain vertebrae in his spine. Like, this is not the kind of thing that would pass through bites. It's just so inconsistent. It's like the whole flight thing too. It's like, there's no, like, you're trying to do the science vampire thing, and then you're just gonna have him gain random freaking powers. It's just, it makes no sense at all. None of this does. And I'm not even saying in the general, you have to make sci-fi make complete logical sense. No, I'm saying this movie does not establish a set of rules that its sci-fi principles operate on. And that bothers me. Because it just means they just do whatever the hell they feel like. And a movie that really is trying to say stuff about this. It also has this really creepy message too, where everyone immediately looks down on like, Dr. Morbius's work as like any genetic experimentation is wrong. It's like, no, genetic modification is a useful tool that we should be, experimenting more with and trying to find out how to best utilize. It is not something to be fear-mongered. And they really do that. Like, they make it very clear in this movie that any genetic modification is just an abomination. It's like they start the whole thing with all the warnings of this is all illegal. Any genetic modification to humans is legal. And Morbius makes an actual interesting statement. It's like, well, actually, we are a combination of traits from hundreds of different animals over thousands of years. That's how evolution works. Like, that's natural evolution. This is wrong. And I'm like, when the doctor said that, I was just like, oh, fuck off, general principles. Fuck off, all the people this is trying to appeal to. Because you know the exact type of person that kind of line appeals to? Those people who actually believe natural has any fucking meaning. Ugh. Sorry, I had to get that rant out of the way because that's always something that's bugged me, is people who look at the word natural and they're like, ooh, this is clearly better. That all that artificial stuff is horrible. And you know what? To those people, I have to say, if you don't like artificial so much, you can take off all the clothes you're wearing and go sleep naked in the woods somewhere. Okay? Yeah, sorry, this movie has brought out my rage. But, yeah, so I'm gonna try and get away from that. Aside from that, there's only one other thing I want to talk about, and that this movie also doesn't just screw with its own logic, it also fucks up the logic of another movie we all actually liked. So we all like No Way Home, right? Spider-Man No Way Home? Well, at the end of that movie, they did the whole time rift thing, and at the end of this movie, Adrian Toomes finds himself transported to this world from some way. I do not know how, because the Doctor Strange spell should not have moved Spider-Man's villains that were in the MCU out of the MCU. So I think this is just a paradox, because in Sony land, Adrian Toomes is playing the Vulture, but in Marvel land, he should still, in the actual MCU universe, he should still be there. So, obviously he appears in a cell, no one has any idea who he is, so he's released. Afterwards, he goes to search out Morbius because he's trying to put together a team to figure out why he was here, because he feels like Spider-Man has something to do with it. And I'm like, okay, so they're gonna hunt down Andrew Garfield Spider-Man or something, maybe go team up with Venom. Oh yay, we get to see the Sinister Six anti-heroes, because apparently the Sinister Six being a villain team is too boring. Or I guess Sony doesn't have the rights to Spider-Man right now because they're letting Marvel play with them. Again, this movie just made me so tired. Like, it's just like every time it does something even remotely interesting, like, hey, look, it's the Vulture. It's like, oh, they fucked that up. And that's just how it felt to watch this. It's like one or two decent ideas in a cookie cutter plot, and they fuck up those, and they fuck up the average stuff too. Like, when you fuck up a cookie cutter plot, I'm sorry, that's a fuck of the highest caliber. Sorry, I've been cursing a lot right there. I'm just so tired. Anyway, sorry this review is a lot more of a downer. I'm going to be reviewing Obsidian. I've also been listening to a new audiobook, Cartographer, so look for one of those on Tuesday. I'll see which one. And I'll see you guys next time for something hopefully more positive. Actually, you know what? Since I'm currently going to have two things finished at least by then, I guarantee you one of them will be a more positive review than this. That's not saying much, but hey, it's something. If you guys, as for news, if you guys want to support me, you can go find me on YouTube or any of the other podcasting sites. Follow me, subscribe there. And you can also tune in on Saturday evening and Tuesday and Thursday of next week, where I will be playing, so you can tune in on Friday, tomorrow, or today, I guess, because this will be posted on Friday. So on the 2nd, on the 3rd, and on the 4th, and potentially on the 6th, where I will be continuing to play Ghostwire Tokyo. Pleasure to speak with you guys. See you guys next time. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you for listening to The Dragon's Library. Please subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes. The Dragon's Library releases new episodes Tuesday and Friday each week, and you can follow us on Twitter at dragon_library2. If you want to suggest an episode topic, my email is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for all your support.